In this video, we are going to talk about that how you can create EVAM with the dynamic filter. So in a previous video, we actually configured that EVAM for that UI builder, and using the EVAM, we actually able to fetch a static data sets. Like we can fetch that active catalog item, and we are representing here. Here is the one problem we face that. So if you see that our page actually have some dynamic contents, like if you select the software related catalog item should be visible here, but that cannot be possible with that static EVAM. So we need to do some tweak so that based on our dynamic filter, we should get the data. So that's the reason we had to make some certain changes so that we can get the dynamic data resources instead of static data resources. So let's see that first. So if you see that in our previous video, we have created a EVAM catalog item as a data resources, and in this data resources, we pass that data resource called demo workspace. That is our EVAM definition. In this EVAM definition, we have inside the entity, we have set that what all catalog item we should bring there. For example, if I go here and then search for EVAM and then go to this EVAM definition under this demo workspace, this is the workspace we have created, or EVAM definition we have created. Inside there, we have defined that entity called catalog item. And in this catalog item entity, we have set a static filter called active true. So once we set this active true static filter, system is always bringing that static data. Like if you see that it's always bringing that whenever we select the office or software, anything we are selecting, that still it is querying to the static data, and based on this static data like active true, it is bringing and representing that. So that is the problem for our case. Now we had to make this dynamic such a way that instead of this static one, we should make or we should get the data dynamically instead of statically. So let's build that. So if you see that, the first thing is that we did that called EVAM data resources. We go to this data resources last day, and then we search for that EVAM, and we pick that EVAM data resources, and then we use the EVAM data resources. So using the EVAM data resources, we actually fetch the data, but this time we are not going to use the EVAM data resources. What we'll do, we'll use that fetch EVAM metadata. So using the fetch EVAM metadata, what will be happen? We will be able to actually query to this EVAM definition, and based on that, we'll be able to get this condition. What is the condition inside that? We'll get that. So let's add that EVAM metadata here. We'll go to and then add that. We'll define that EVAM definition. For example, we'll use the demo workspace again. And then if you see that output, we are getting that output like data. Inside the data, we are getting that client composite data metadata query, and inside that get metadata. This we can work, we can do that, and inside that we will be able to find out called data source. So data source is nothing but this is the data source, or you can say that from where we are actually getting the data. So EVAM definition under that data source from where we are getting. So we are getting that catalog item. So we can fetch that, and we can go to this data resource. We have right now one data resource, and that have four property basically. One of the property called active equal to true. So you can see that we are actually, if we go here, the filter we have put called active equal to true. Now this data resource we need to be dynamically override based on that page condition that will receive that. For example, we are getting that active equal to true, that is the static. So we need to override and then get our own data. So that's our main goal. So I'm not doing anything. I'll just I just show you that how it looks like that. I'll just add, got it, and then I close that. So what will be happen? It will be add that EVAM metadata. So using the EVAM metadata, we can actually query to this data set, and then we can get the filtered condition. What is that current filter condition? That's it. We get that condition first. Now what I'll do, I'll go to this, scroll down this page, and if you see that I was using the repeater and other component here in the bottom section of this page, like here, this repeater, I don't need anything or anything like the repeater anymore, because we are using that data sets and we are using the EVAM. So I will just remove this bottom part of this page, this one for the demonstration purpose we created earlier. Let's delete that. I'll just close and delete this section. Okay. All right. So our EVAM part is done. Now what we'll do, so let's talk about that EVAM metadata. So we actually able to fetch that the data, or you can say that we actually able to fetch that component of the EVAM data resource. So in a high level, I can say that I am able to fetch this data resource. Now I need to override this condition. So that is not possible out of box at that moment. For that, what you have to do, you have to do little customization. The first thing is that I'll click add data resource, and then I am going to create a new data resource, custom data resource called transform data resource. So I'll select the transform data resource here and put call EVAM dynamic filter. Now in this EVAM dynamic filter, I already told you in our previous video like how we can create the data broker and which situation we should use the which data broker. So we are going to do some scripting so that we can override the default filter that we are actually getting call active equal to true. We need to override that. Okay, so let's do this case like let's do that overriding part. The first thing is that we are going to do something, some script, and then that script will override that. Okay, so how we'll do that? First we'll get some input. Okay, in the input we'll get some data, and then in the script we'll do some scripting. So let's do that. In the input, what I will do that in the input, I will take this data resource name because I'm getting that, or I'm able to fetch this data resource. So I will get the data resource as an input, and in the second parameter, what I will do that I will take a query so that I can override that. Okay, so let's do that. In the property section, I have already mentioned that I'll copy in my, I'll put this details or note into my YouTube video description. So in the property, I take as a two parameter, as I mentioned that first is the EVAM metadata, that is the first parameter. And then in the second parameter, I'll take a query, or you can say that the query that I want to override that. Okay, now both fields are mandatory. You can see the mandatory is a true. This is the string field that I am expecting as a query, and this is the object field. Okay, and in this script what I am doing, I'll just copy that and then paste here. In the script what I am doing, I'll just explain that as a input dot query. So input dot query is nothing but this name. So we'll get a query, and then what I'll do, I'll add this is in a dynamic query. And once we get this, or once we put that as in a variable, we will get as a second parameter called EVAM metadata, that is nothing but top one, and then we'll do a dot working till the data resources. Okay, so how we are doing that? We go to this EVAM data meta, we go to this output, we go to the data, we go to this glide composite data metadata query, and then we go to this get meta, and then data resource till the data resource will get that, because we don't know how many data resources are defined. So what I am doing that we'll do dot work till this point data resource, and then you can see that I have done the same thing, input dot event metadata dot glide composite data meta query get metadata and data resource till the point we go to this data resource. And after that, we don't know how many data resources are there. We'll do a for loop, we'll run a for loop. So here we are running a for loop. As our case, we have only one data resources here in this case, so we'll get that one. And then after that, you can see that under this data resources, we have a 4 key query short field CSID table. So inside the query, we'll override with our new query. So inside this query, you can see that data resource dot index and then dot query, we'll put the dynamic query, and then after we dynamically replace all this case, we'll just return that. We'll just return that EVAM data. Okay, so we'll return that. So let's save that our data resource. So once you have defined, or once you have created this data broker, or you can say that data resources, the next steps is that you have to define a ACL. So we have discussed earlier this point, but if you have not watched or skipped that, so once you created the data resources, we need to define a ACL. So let's do that. I'll go here, I'll elevate my role as a security admin, and then I'll create a ACL. As you know that the ACL type should be called data broker, and then operation should be execute, and then here in the name we should pass this sysid. So we'll copy this sysid and paste here. And then in this role we should put that any role. So I'm just putting the SNC internal role or ITIL. So let's see, yeah, so SNC internal role, and then I will save that so that these data broker are accessible or can be used by SNC internal role. So now our EVAM dynamic data resource are done. We'll go to here, and then what we'll do, I will go and then add one more data resource called search called EVAM. So now you can see that EVAM dynamic data filter are present, and you can see as a configuration we need that EVAM metadata and then query. So let's add that. So we'll add that in the EVAM metadata. From where we should get that, we will get or we will bind this to dynamically. We'll click this dynamic binding, go to this data resources, and then previously we created called fetch EVAM metadata, that we are going to select output, and then data, we will use that data and apply, and let's see what we are getting. So once we set that EVAM metadata from the previous step, so this is the fetch one, we fetch that, and then we are able to actually get that data. So we are able to go to this resource, and then here we are getting that output, and then here we are right now query got overridden with empty. Now here we are going to put the query. So let's say that I'm going to put the query call SC category something. So I'll put that SC cat item something, and then if we put that, and that is getting updated here. So whatever query we are putting here, dynamically updating that in your in this case, right? So this is a great thing. We are able to do that based on our selection, right? Now what should be the next thing? The next thing should be we should pass this query, and once we get this, so we actually, what we are doing here, we are actually overriding. So we get this fetch metadata, and then we dynamically overriding that query. Now next thing is that we have to fetch the data. To fetch the data, we are going to use that plus data resource, and then we are going to use that out of box EVAM again. So to fetch the data, we have a fetch EVAM data. So basically EVAM data resource is doing two things. It is doing fetching the EVAM metadata and fetching the data. So both it's actually doing with the help of EVAM data resources, but we actually doing in our steps, we are doing the three steps. We are fetching the EVAM metadata. We created a dynamic filter that's overriding the filter, and then third, we are fetching the EVAM data. So we'll select that EVAM fetch like there, and then click add. So under this fetch EVAM data, what we have to do, we have to set this EVAM dynamic filter. This is the custom component we have created that we need to set here. So let's do that. We will set the dynamic binding, go to this data resources, and then EVAM dynamic filter, go to output, go to this glide composite data, and then get meta. We have to select and click apply. Once we select that, you can see that I'm getting that output. So what is the output I'm getting? If I go here, I can go to this data section, go to this glide composite data query, go to this get composite data, and based on that, I am actually fetching that item 20 data. So it means that I'm able to actually fetch the 20 data here. I can see that. So it's returning the 20 data. If I open that, each data have all this template and property. So it means that we already reach our sections. It means that we are actually filter out based on the category we are doing something, and then based on that we are actually able to successfully making the changes. Now let's go back to the SC category item table and do something. So let me go back to the SC category table. So instead of going to the category table, I'll go to the catalog item table. And let me put a filter. Let's say that I'll put a filter called active equal to true. And then I'll group by with the category. And let's see that I am looking for something, some category item which is less than 20 item. For example, you can see that can we help you? So in this section, we have 11 item. And if I show match with this, it give me it encoded and give me a static query. So which return me that around 11 You can see 11 item. So what I'll do, I'll right click, copy this query, and then go back to this editor sections. And then here you can see that we have a dynamic filter. Here we'll put that query based on our case. So let me put this query. So once we put that, that's it. Now we'll go to this EVAM, fetch EVAM data, because if you see that how we are aligning right now, previously we are actually using that EVAM data resources that actually statically fetching the data from that whatever is behind the backend it's set. But in this, we are actually using the three component. First, we are going to fetch that EVAM metadata. Then secondly, we are dynamically filtering that based on our conditions. And then actually we are manipulating that EVAM dynamic query. And then we are actually fetching the data. So if we go here under this section, we should get that 11 data, not the 20 items. So let's go to this composite section. And you can see under the item section, we are actually getting 11 item. So it means that our criteria, or you can say that our component is working perfectly fine. We could have passed this filter dynamically. We are able to passing this data dynamically. Now what we have to do, we have to, if you see here that if I compare actually, so if you go to this EVAM data resource, which actually fetches the data, and if I go and expand that, it have a call composite data viewer, and that you can see that under this you have items, and if you open the item, it show the template, and template have a template name, and it have a property value properly mapped. So it have a template and property value map. But if we go to this fetch data, that also returns the proper data. So if we go and little bit component like that, you can see it's also returning that item. But in the item, if I open each one item, that doesn't returning the template name properly. It is just returning that you know the CSID. Their property is also not binded correctly. Okay, so for we had to do a additional step. So we perform these three steps. We are actually perform these three steps. We need to do one more additional thing. So let's do that. I'll go here, then add one more data resource called bind data component. So we'll search for the bind data component property. So this is the another data resources we are going to use that. And then if you see the type of this data bind is the transform. So it's a transform, not the GraphQL. So our EVM is a GraphQL, but this is the transform. So it's actually transforming the data properly from the GraphQL data. So we'll add this component, and then here we need to pass this GraphQL data. So what should be the GraphQL data? We'll go and then dynamically bind that. And then here, what we'll do, we will put that under this data resources, we'll go to this fetch data output, we'll bind that output and click apply. Once we do that, you will be see the output also updated, and this is exactly the same way it should be returning our data resources. See, template have a name and it have a property value combination. So property and then value. So it is convert your data. If you see, this is your actual data, and it was not. Here you can see that the glide composite data query get, it have a lot of steps, and you can see that if I open each item, that's there, and then each item have template, and then property are not properly binded. See, each property have name and value pair. So it is name and then value pair. Instead of name value pair, if you see that our case, I mean this bind data component property, it's bind with the property. So if we go here, items, go here, and then go to this AP, any of this property value, it's not a value pair, it's a key and value pair basically. So this is actually how it converted your data, and you have to use that. So this is the fourth step. So we have to do fourth step: fetch EVAM metadata, dynamic filter. This is the completely you have to create and do the some scripting that I mentioned. Then you have to do the fetch EVAM data one, and then bind data to compose component property one. So you have to do these many steps to get into this case. Now after that, the final step is that you have to change the data set. So under this data set, previously it was fetching from our EVM data resources. Now we had to change this to our new ones. We'll go here, binding, and go to this data resource, and then bind the data, and then click the output sections and click apply, so that it can fetch from these bind data. So you can see that based on our category, it's showing those related items. Let's go back here. And then if we change to some other category and see that's actually able to fetch or not. So if we go and group by the category, and let's say I'm going to, for the departmental services, and copy this query and go and then paste here under this dynamic filter. Now it is everything is controlling from here, not from the EVAM backend, whatever data set we have defined here. So if you see that right now, so related items should be visible. So you can see that one item are visible. So this way you can actually make the dynamic binding. Now I cannot go and then every time go and update here into this category. So what we have to do, we have to get this under this page parameter. We have a parameter called ID. That parameter has to automatically set into this query, right? So this is what we are expecting. To do that, what we have to do, we are going to create a client script. So let's say that I have already a client script. So this is a which is printing actually called context API ID. So you can see console.log. I already put that hi. This is the one which actually printed that page property. What I am trying to do that this client script I am going to run on that page load. So let's see, is it already calling, where it is calling. So this is being called. This is triggered by, you can see the empty. So this client script I want to run or call whenever the page property changes. So if you see that by default, whenever the page property changes, these are the things are already doing, like setting loading, set loading and loading. This is not needed because we are not doing anything related to any further. So we'll just delete this one. So we don't need that refresh data resource because we are not doing the repeater. So what we are going to do that whenever the page property will be changes, we are going to call this client script. What client script we are going to call? We are going to call this new client script. So we are going to call this, and using this client script, what we are going to do that we are going to get this API context. You can see we are getting that. Okay. Now what I am going to do that I will do a one method called. So this client script will be run every time we are going to update our page property, or we can say that whenever we'll click the category, this client script will be run. Now what we are going to do that we will use the, we are going to create a client state parameter. So you know what is the client state parameter? It's basically variable. Okay. So we'll say that dynamic filter. So this is our variable name called dynamic filter. So this dynamic filter is going to be, I'm going to use in my script. So we are going to do one thing. We will, in this dynamic filter, we'll set that active equal to true. So let's go back to this here. I'll copy this query and then put here call initial value equal to this one. And I will remove this sysID. So I'll remove this sysID. So initial value will be this one. And then after that, I will append the sysID. So this is our initial value. So we'll click there and then here go to this client script and write a code called API dot set state, and in bracket we want to set that this is our dynamic filter and what value we want to set that. So after that here what we are going to do that we are going to do like this one, and then go and again copy this query and then paste here. And this time instead of sysID, what we'll do, we'll go and then put the plus sign and then simply copy this one here and then just do that. So what I'm going to do that, I'm going to put that API.setState and then dynamic filter active equal to true and category equal to, that should become whatever is come under the page property. So let's do that. In this here, we are not going to use this query anymore. We will use this client state parameter. So let's go back, bind to this client state, and then we'll use this dynamic filter and then apply that. Now what we have to do additionally, we had to refresh these three, because whenever the value will be updated, we should also refresh ourselves. So what we'll do, we'll go to this event handler and then go to this call event dynamic filter. This one I want to refresh. We'll add that, and then I'll click here, and then I want to refresh that this fetch event data one, and then I want to refresh that this bind data to component property. This one also needs to be refreshed there. So these are the things we need to done that. So we have done a lot of steps. So we, after that, what we want to do, that here under this dynamic property we have a one called event. We'll go, and then here you can see the data which successfully we are going to loading these stuffs needs to be stopped, so that we are going to add. So now you can see that I have just refreshed that workspace, and this is our home screen. Now if I go to this office, you can see that it's actually a search office item. If I go to the software related item are searched and showing here. And then if I click here called peripheral related item being searched and showing that. So this is the how powerful is EVAM and how powerfully you can dynamically bind that. So let's see, or let's understand one more time what are the steps we have done. The first step is that we actually use that fetch EVAM metadata that actually fetch your data initially. Actually that it fetch the metadata of the EVAM. Then we dynamically, create a data resource, and that dynamically bind your data. Here we can pass a query, but that query will pass from a client state. So we created a client state a parameter called dynamic filter, and that client state parameter we actually set here under this dynamic binding. Now we do a fetch EVAM data, so that actually point to this data. So you can see it's EVAM dynamic filter. From there we are actually doing the fetch EVAM data, and from this fetch EVAM data we actually do the bind data source. So we have done 4 steps into that, our 1 2 3 4. This 4th step we actually done to get rid of this dynamic filter. And then also we created a one client script called client state parameter that have a initial filter. Now what we are doing right now, after all these steps, it's actually searching and doing that. So we're actually returning the data. So now we have mapped this data set. Instead of these data resources, now we have mapped these to the bind data resources, this one. So we have under this data section, instead of these EVAM data resources, we are bind to that data bind data to component property one. So we change that pointing part. Now, after all these things, what we have done, that we have created a client script, and that client script actually get called whenever you go to this body, and under this body, whenever the page property changes, there we are calling this client script. And in this client script, we are saying that we are going to be update our client state parameter. So whenever the page property will be changed or page value will be changes, we are going to dynamically update our this filter. So this filter we are going to dynamically updating here. Okay, and after all of these, we actually has to refresh our all these data resources, that for 3 data resource at least, like EVAM dynamic filter, EVAM data and bind. These all needs to be refreshed one more time. And finally, under this data binding, we have actually go to this event section, and whenever the data fetch successfully happen, we are turning off this loading. So there are a lot of steps I have performed. I will request that go and check each and every steps one by one, so that you can successfully complete these labs. So after that, you can see that it's nicely showing the data, and then it is have that list, and then grid view, it's showing the data properly the way we want. And then this is how it looks like. It's very good and nice way we can. Now if you want to update any like any category or anything, you don't need to come to the UI builder. That can be controlled through your backend EVAM module. So that's it for today. If you have any question, let me know in my comment section. Thank you very much. Have a great day.